Hello, friends. Today I welcome you to a beautiful poem which truly goes on to place Chaucer, Geoffrey Chaucer, as the father of English poetry. And this poem, I gave you an introduction to this, the Canterbury Tales, and the prologue to it some days back. It is a poem on telling you, introducing to you some pilgrims of the 14th century England and who form the God's plenty. Whatever kind God has created on earth, you can find all of them studied in this beautiful portrait gallery with all their modesty, with all their frivolity, and with all their criminality, even. So, we will see, today we are going to study the text. You will have to bear in mind that these are pilgrims. They are for some moral gains. And Chaucer lends a sense of authenticity to this narrative by giving you the exact details when and where and who gathered together for this pilgrimage to the shrine of St. Thomas Becket, which is situated in Canterbury. This is a 30 days journey towards and 30 days journey backwards from London, and since Chaucer assumed upon himself the task of speaking about the twin ladders of the 14th century England, the twin ladders, that is the society, that is the state, and the church. So he has representatives coming from these classes, and you can see them beautifully well when Chaucer narrates. The expertise or the position of Chaucer lies in the fact that he has taken the old Norfolk English and made it his own. Such profundity is there, such elaboration, and with such dexterity he handles the subject matter of the pilgrimage and of the portrayal of his age, that this language has come to be understood as the Chaucerian language. Though written in the English script, the sound of this is different because it is a dialect. It is not a language. So he dealt with in a dialect and made it a language of his own. I shall read the text as it would sound in English. So we continue. Here begins the book of the Tale of Canterbury. And the description is, when that April with its showers suit, rains, dark rains, very dark torrential rains have happened in April, and the drought of March has pierced to the root and bathed every vine in such liquor, of which virtue grows is the flower. So he first tells you the season in which people are setting out on their pilgrimage. It is the month of April, when the dark showers have added to the waters of the marsh which pierced to the root. That means all the plants have had their fill from the heavens. The rains have given them that happiness. They have bathed. The waters have bathed. They have not just sprinkled some water, they have bathed them. They have cleaned every vine, vine, the soft the soft plants, the tendrils in such liquor. So the water has acted not as a water, but as a liquor. Intoxicated is nature. In this intoxicated nature, flowers have come up, they have propped everywhere. Because of this virtue, grows is the flower. They have grown. So we are introduced, the very beginning lines are to tell you that nature is beautiful. In the time that he is wanting to go on the pilgrimage, the nature is absolutely beautiful. It's green all over and it is colored all over. When Zephyrus also with his sweet breath inspired hath in every holt and heath the tender crops. Zephyrus is the west wind. The wind has come, and the wind has been personified. He says that this wind with its sweet breath, it has been breathing. This monstrous season has been breathing hard, such that it has inspired, hath is has, it has inspired in every holt and heath, the garden and field, in every garden and fields, it has inspired what? The tender crops. So there are crops everywhere. These people who will be on their 60-day pilgrimage towards and backwards would be having crops on both the sides of the way that they are going to take. There are tender crops. And the young son hath in the ram his half course run. So this is a little bit of the humor. He says that sun, ram is the first sign of zodiac, and the sun takes its course. I told you that priorly it was believed that it is sun that moves around. So the earth. So he says that sun, the nascent sun, the very young sun, because it's the beginning of the year, and sun hath run half its course in the ram. That is, it is the middle of April. It has run, the sun has moved in April. April, the month which is the month of flowers and festivity, because people will now be having the harvest of their corns. So this is the best season. The sun has, even, it's not the earth that is happy only, it is the sun also, because the sun is full of its energy, its new energy, the young sun. And small foals make melody, and there are birds all around who are giving free of cost music to everyone. So when you are moving, you may not be feeling deserted. You will feel absolutely in the company of nature, in the form of the lush vines, the beautiful flowers, the good crops that are growing, and the birds that are making melody. These birds that sleep all night with open eye. So this is love for details in Chaucer. Can anyone sleep with eyes open? But these birds have slept all the while with their eyes open, because birds do not have eyelids. When they sleep, they just pull across their nictitating membrane over their pupils. So this Chaucer, in his own very special humorous way, says that they have been sleeping all the while with their eyes open. So much of excitement is there in nature. So much of beauty has been sprawled all around that even they don't want to miss any second, any moment of this beauty that is all pervasive. So, this part of the poem, it continues with the happy narration of the beautiful nature. So prick them nature in their courages. Courages is hearts. So nature is pricking not only the plants, the vines, the flowers, the crops and the birds, but it is also pricking people in their hearts that long folk to go on pilgrimages. So much pleasant is the nature that people want to go on pilgrimages. Isn't it anticlimactic? Because when the nature is pleasant, we all wish to go on picnics. But 14th century would have accorded a picnic which had some kind of moral purpose as well. The nature is befitting. It's very pleasant. But 14th century England people would rather go on a pilgrimage than move on to a picnic. So they are going on a pilgrimage. And palmers for to seek strange strands of far off, known in sundry lands. Palmers, voyagers, travelers, for to seek, they are seeking strange strands lands. They all want to go to strange places. Strange here means unknown, not very regularly visited. So the people are now, the nature has pricked them in their hearts to the extent that all voyagers want to go to strange strands in far offs known in sundry lands. So they want to go in sundry. Sundry is very many, all kinds of places. And specially from every city's end, shire is city, and specially from every shire's end of England to Canterbury they went. So they all go largely, specially, nearly all people, they want to go to Canterbury, because if they are going on a pilgrimage, people will be hospitable enough and cater to their needs on this very long journey. I would like to give an example of the Ramdevra celebration, the celebration of Ramapir. So when people are going on the pilgrimage to Ramdevra, we see in India, in several places, they have temporary camps, temporary inns, where these pilgrims can make a comfortable stay, can have their food and can rest. So in the similar manner, in every shire's end, from every city's end, people are longing. There is a desperate desire to go to Canterbury. And why do they go to Canterbury? What is special about this shrine? The holy blissful martyr for to seek that them should have helped when they were sick. So Canterbury, it is the shrine of St. Thomas Becket, who is known for ridding people from their physical maladies. So let us try to understand why in the month of March, what has happened to the people, what much of suffering might have come to them, that they are all wanting to go to get rid of their sickness to the shrine of St. Thomas Becket. As we'll proceed further in the poem, we will find that not any one of them is sick. because a sick man would not probably, not at all, take a journey of 60 days. They are sick somewhere in their hearts. There is a kind of moral sickness which Chaucer is wanting to talk about. He will talk to you, and when it is not advisable enough that I talk to you, let Chaucer talk to us all. So he says that they are going to this holy blissful martyr, the saint who will rid them, who would help them when that they were sick. Befell that in that season on a day. Now, authenticity is being added. He told you the month of April. He told you the kind of nature that is there, and now he tells you that it was on a day. Where? In Southwark, at the Tabard, as I lay. Southwark is a small town. Tabard is the name of the inn. He is already there. He has decided, and Chaucer was very fond of, he was a regular visitor of the inns because he is the artist who painted people. And what could be the best place to see people? The idlers and the rich ones all visit inns. So, as was a habit with him, he was there. He says, I was already in, ready to wend on my pilgrimage. Even I had come there to go on my pilgrimage to Canterbury with full devout heart. So when this was happening, befell means it just happened that in this season on a day at Southwark at the Tabard as I lay, ready to go on my pilgrimage to Canterbury with full devout heart. At night were come into that hostel, well 9 and 20 in a company of sundry folk. He said, I had already deposited myself there to begin my journey the next day. Well, at night there were 9 and 20 pilgrims. So, you know you will be seeing first the poet and then the 29 pilgrims who entered there of sundry folk. These are people not of a fraternity. They are people from all walks of life, from all classes, from all strata, and from both the divisions of the society that time, the state and the church. Church should be integral to it because it's a pilgrimage and there should be churchmen also moving in. But the state also. Church already are holy people. They might find their gods in their churches. But the ordinary people. So this is a fair chance for you to see by contrast or by a parallel the state and the church. So there were sundry folk by adventure fall. They have come not for spirit. Poet Chaucer tells you that the feeling that has stirred them to undertake this long journey is an adventure. They are very adventure loving. They feel that there would be some kind of excitement, there would be some kind of elation and an adventure here. So sundry folk are there by adventure, struck by adventure in fellowship. And they had come one by one as if though in fellowship. Fellowship also means not that they came one by one, but also that all of them were moving towards Canterbury, and pilgrims were they all. And these were all pilgrims that towards Canterbury would ride. So they will ride, all of them had this, they must have placed a word with Chaucer that they are all towards Canterbury. The chambers and the stables were wide. So the chambers where to seat the people, to rest the people, and stables where the horses would have their night's rest. They were wide, and well were we eased, or at best, eased at best. We were given the best possible comfort because Tabard was one of the very prime inns, the roadside rest houses. So each and every one, all 30 of them were eased at best. And shortly, when the sun was to rest, so had I spoken with them every one. So Chaucer gives first a glimpse of himself. He is a man, very gregarious. He has had a talk with everyone and told them that I was of their fellowship also. And we all decided, we all decided early for to rise to take our way there as Ayu device. So we all knew that we would be rising up early the next day so that we could take our way, as I've already told you. So Chaucer has had a talk and he has a whole night before him. Adventure might have stricken the others, but adventure has stricken Chaucer the most. How? But nevertheless, while I have time and space. So he says, no, I understand that we must all sleep because next day we have to begin with our journey. But he says, no, I have time and space. Before that, I further in this tale pace, I think it accordant to reason, that before I can go any further in this story of telling you what we did, who were we, and all the people, he is going to give you a description of all of them. So he says, before I can any further move on to the pilgrimage, I think it accordant is right, to reason, to tell you all the condition of each of them, so as it seemed me. Underline this. So I am going to tell you about each of them. But how will I tell you? So as it seemed me. So as I thought. So even before he can portray his people, because what he was doing, his task was to to describe the people of his times. And it would be including some very prominent people from the state and the religion. So he had every danger of being mistaken. So he makes an apology right in the beginning, and this is his humor. Let me now tell you one thing. What is humor? Humor, you might give a very simple definition of it, that humor is laughing with others. Something that can make us laugh. And humor is very different from satire in that satire is laughing at others. The one who satirizes keeps himself on a higher stand and everyone else is on a lesser stand. Whereas in humor, people are all at an equal stand. So even before he can give you a description of these people, he makes an apology for his short-sightedness. And this short-sightedness is an apology also of his less understanding. So, I would give you an example that if I am annoyed with someone and I want to prick upon his conscience by saying that he has a mole over his nose that destroys his beauty, I think if I say like that you don't look good with this, I have every likelihood to being given an insult in return. But if I say, oh, you are such a beauty, You stand so outrightly apart from all the common featured people, but only for this mole. So you know what? People would take my first words of appreciation as the lasting words. And I will leave them with no scope to take this small mention of the mole, which is hideous, maybe. They will take it easy. They will not retort or they will not be annoyed with me. So he says that, as it seemed to me, the apology comes right before he has given the description of anyone else. So he said that I am going to tell you all the condition of each of them, so as it seemed to me, and which they were, and of what degree. So I'll also tell you that who they were, what was their status, and what was their degree. That means degree is the monetary status. And also in what array is dress, and also in what dress that they were in. So because dress is it's the first indication of the personality of a person. So he says that I'll also tell you what was the dress that they were wearing, and at a night then will I first begin. So he chooses to pay his first homage to the greatest man of the state, the man of the highest esteem, the knight. Knights are commanders and chiefs of an army, of a big army. So he pays his first homage to this knight, because if knight is in good humor, he would take care of all the troop that is following, the 29 people, and of which Chaucer is a part. So, the introductory lines of the poem are first about the description of the nature, the stirring of the hearts of the nature, the stirring of the hearts of people who, by a sense of adventure, are now moving towards the shrine of Saint Becket, who will rid them of their physical maladies. And then he says that, Chaucer says that I have had a good talk with each of them, and I know fully well who is who. So I'll talk to you about them, and I will tell as they came in. This also saves him the trouble of not offending anyone. The people there were high and low also, not very. So he will tell you about these people, and he also suggests his intention of speaking about the knight, the one who has been the savior of kingdoms and one who will be the savior of this troop of frivolous. But I shouldn't exclude the really good men also here in this pilgrimage. Thank you.